he came in studio and he was like, "Hey, I want to talk about the 9/11 Netflix special." So tell us, what was it?
Well, it's a I guess like a mini series on Netflix about the 9/11 events, and it was pretty good because it's like a timeline. It talks about what led up to the rise of Al Qaeda and all that stuff, and obviously we're 20 years in. We just ended the war officially, so it was something that was like a big part in our lives, and which is funny is like the kids that were born,
On 9/11.
yeah, like there's just a lot of people that don't even know what was going on really or what the events were. And I know it was like one of the biggest things, but it feels like it's faded out almost. Like, we always said, never forget, never forget, never forget. But it's like a lot of the events have been, I don't want to say watered down, because for us that remember, it was like, damn, man, that was a crazy day. So I started watching this with my wife, and we're like, you almost like relive it. Like, man, remember the chaos? Like, first it was a plane crash, then another plane crash, then another plane, like, then the building fell. Then, you didn't know where planes were just crashing everywhere and buildings were falling. It was like, what the hell is going on? And it gives you like the backstories behind everything, what led up to Al Qaeda. What were the hijackers doing? They were here for like 3 years prior or something, and where they were living. I mean, it's pretty detailed.
So are these like people from the administration, or they're
From
like,
everything,
or they're like smaller guys like senators and like congressmen telling their part?
it's everything. Like they even have like former
Like
leaders of Al Qaeda that they've interviewed, huh?
Does
Like Ben
Condoleezza
saw.
Rice come out?
I haven't seen her. They just show interviews like
Does Donnie come out? Donald Rumsfeld?
Donnie, good old Donnie. It just shows old interviews from different outlets.
Oh, okay.
But like as far as the interviews that were conducted during this documentary, they have a lot of like former leaders of Al Qaeda, former leaders of the what do you say, Mujahideen, and they were like when they were fighting against the Soviets, and then they have like former intel operatives that were there giving money to the Taliban to fight the Russians, and then it's like they had these relationships, and then they tell their story on how it evolved into them hating Americans and why.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, this sounds like a dumb question, but what is the resentment that
Well, think about it.
they
dude.
have toward the
Okay,
United
think
States?
about it this way.
Like,
There-
where
okay, look
did
at-
it begin? Where did it begin?
Well, this is just my opinion too, but off of what I was watching and off of what I know, because I like to call myself a history buff. Think about it. If
smoking his pipe.
no, think about it.
And now,
people coming in.
Story with Peter.
Think about people coming into our territory right here. Like
Yeah.
they come into El Paso, and they have one agenda, which Americans had capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Russians had communism.
Okay.
The Russians came down. They were trying to make it a communist state, I guess you could say, and the U.S. comes in and sends advisors and CIA and stuff like that to combat them, but they're using the Afghans to, hey, you're fighting your own war, you're fighting for your own war, but ultimately it's for the interest of the United States, like keep it a democracy, not communism, all that stuff, and you're using them as pawns almost. Then they make relationships with the Saudis and stuff over oil and everything, and it's like, damn, they kind of just use our people, like the Muslim people. I mean, this is their view.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's my opinion. And after a while, it's almost like, well, all we are is pawns to them, basically, to fit their own agenda.
To everyone.
Yeah, and it's like, the Saudis kind of are no longer they're not following their religion the way they should. So then it's like they kind of see the Americans as the ones the bad influencers, and it's like, we got to fight this. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's just like a Cliff Note version on what I believe is the reasoning. and they're strained, they're losing their culture and all because they're getting influenced by the bad Americans and on top of many other factors. I mean, it's not just one factor. There's so many different things. So
It's because, like, I don't know. I feel like the United States, they always dip their nose in.
But for their interests.
Yeah, for their interest. Like, even the shit that was going on in, like, was it Eastern Europe? Like, in the early to mid 90s? Like, the United States was going in there. And
well, you don't even have to go that far. You could just look at Latin America alone. I mean, you could look at Venezuela, you know, these countries that we don't like this leader, so we're going to help fund another leader. You know, we've always done that. Most big countries have done that to support their interests.
I wanted to get your opinion, Peter, on this. I mean, we're talking about 9/11. 20 years have passed, right? 20.
Yeah.
You kind of went to the service kind of because of what happened a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean,
how do you think?
When the events of 9/11 happened, I was a sophomore, and
were you?
Yeah.
You were a sophomore?
I was a freshman, yeah. So.
God damn.
I was a sophomore when they happened, and I remember I was like, I kind of always knew I was going to join the military period, but man. This was I was in my own. Yeah. I was in my own that day. I'll tell you that.
But 20 years later, I mean, that was the reason why you got into. 20 years later, is this how you envisioned like we were going to get out and what happened and just the?
I mean, no. Honestly, growing up the way we did, like, okay, one of the early wars, or one of the wars I witnessed was when I was little. I was in elementary. Was
the Cold War?
Iraqi, the Gulf War.
Here you go.
And we went in there, we bombed the hell out of them, and everything was resolved. You know, like boom, 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 and yes, it was a very short battle. There was lives lost, but it was in and out. You know, boom. Never could I have ever comprehended the fact that we were going to be there 20 years later. Never did I ever think that I would be part and leave multiple times overseas in a war that wasn't really clearly defined, because they called it the War on Terror. Yeah. But it was like the War on Terror is so broad.
Yeah.
And it could be anything. I mean, literally, it could be the War on Terror, and there were attacks in Africa, in Asia, and that was all considered War on Terror. Then there was obviously Iraq, and people could argue, well, Iraq had nothing to do with it. Oh, but it was a terrorist state still. They supported this. People who hated America. And if you Ben and I were talking about this, it was so broad. The use of military force that was brought up, and they talk about it in that documentary, it was so broad. But there was something that George Bush said, and when you give him that kind of power, like he could authorize the military force, there was something that he said, and I'm not faulting him because emotions were high, obviously, when your country was attacked and building, I mean, on so many fronts. He said, you're either with us or against us. So if you're not with us, we're going to come to you. We're going to, and we needed a foothold. And that was one thing. In that region, we knew where the attacks came from. We knew the people that planned the attacks. We knew where it was. There was no foothold for us. They had the northern part of Afghanistan, but there was no main foothold. Kuwait was our allies, but Kuwait's this small, this small little country. What's the next biggest country that we could overthrow, that we know we could overthrow? Iraq. Boom. Yeah. I mean, this is just, it's common knowledge, but it's also like opinionated, I guess you could say. Yeah. And so going back to your original question, did I envision this? No, man. I honestly, when you think of a war and the way we saw things, and we're like the best country and we have the best resources, we were going to go in and out. Little did we know, 20 years later, I would have never thought that my own kids, I was going to have multiple kids see this, live through this war. And even though they didn't comprehend it to the fact, to what we know about it, they were still living through it. A lot of people, it was the forgotten war, because a war was going on, and unless your parents were military or you had someone in the military, the war didn't affect you, because it's so far away.
A lot of people didn't even know that we still had troops over there, like, fighting this war.
But I mean, like, it just feels like they're in the same state now than when we first got there. And as you being there, day in, day out, the grind of being there, and just like, does it feel like you did it for nothing? Does it feel like how does that make you feel?
I mean,
what's your opinion on that?
I wouldn't say you did it for nothing, because there's a whole generation of 20 years of Afghans that had the support of the military that was there, of U.S. troops. They saw, I mean, I wasn't saying it was the greatest conditions, but they had hope that their country could be something more. Now, that idea alone, not necessarily like, okay, we pulled out and kind of things are falling apart again, but that idea, that little flame in them, that brightness that they didn't have before, could spark into something else. And there's there's like a civil war evolving right now, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, I was gonna ask something similar. Like, do you think we left that area in left that area in a much worse state than what it was?
I wouldn't say a much worse state. I think, like, going back to what I said, and I could totally understand how people feel like we went over there, we didn't do anything, especially troops. There's different opinions on it. I have friends that have gone to Afghanistan that feel like they didn't, that it was all for nothing, and then I have friends that say that it wasn't for.
Even if you helped one person, it was worth
you made
it.
a difference.
Yeah.
And that's why I said it's almost sparking that view of something better. Even though things get worse, like things are getting bad again, there's still that hope in a whole generation of 20 years. Like, hey, it could be so much more.
They got a taste of it.
That was their introduction to the outside world.
Yeah, parks and amusement parks and all kinds of stuff that they didn't have.
And remember, prior, like, one thing the documentary says is prior to all that, like in the 70s, Afghanistan was a very modern. they wore skirts and everything. It was fanatics that took over. It was like
extremists.
Yeah, extremists. So it was just the way things change. But I do believe that you could only guide people so much before they gotta take hold. And I'm not saying anything bad about the Afghanistan people or anything like that, but you got to have that will yourself to want to change. The way that they change to an extremist state, or there's those in power that are extremists, they had this will. I mean, call it what they want, but it was a will they had, and they kept pushing. On the opposite end, if there's people that want to make things better and not just live under the thumb of rule, then they're gonna have to push through. And some people say it's not our fight to fight, and that's where it comes, like, damn if you do, damn if you don't. But going back to your question, like, was it all for nothing? No, I think we helped many people. I do believe there was a strong toll in the cost of lives and money and resources and all, but it was like, I wouldn't say that it was for nothing. No, not at all.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, you were the one that was there and stuff, and I
well, let's clarify. I never went to Afghanistan. I went to
Iraq.
I mean, though. But I was in the Iraq area for 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, see, like,
but it's a lot different from somebody here sitting at home all day and saying we shouldn't have been there.
Like, people always branch in. There were like two separate wars going on, and like people always like branch those two together. Yeah, like the American. Yeah,
but
people,
I mean, Iraq kind of extended from the Afghanistan.
But you could say that Iraq was initiated because of the actions of 9/11, obviously. But and like I said, I have a bunch of friends that have so much more attachment to the Afghanistan war than I do. But I mean, I'm not answering for them. I'm just giving my opinion, and I wouldn't say that it was for nothing. I would say it's just unfortunate the way things work out, man. Like
it's kind of like that kid, right? Like you teach them all these things, you tell them all this stuff that you can do, and you kind of try to show them the right way. But at the end, it's their decision, right? I mean, you can only guide them so much.
Like your own children, basically. Yeah. You could only lead them to water. You can't make them drink.
Yeah.